Hello, fellow skin suits. This is Angel.
And Ember.
Deep down, do you have a secret passion for true crime, sarcasm, inappropriate jokes, but you still want to hear all those lovely details?
However, you still need a little bit of humor to get you through those dark moments?
Then come hang out with us over at the Color Me Dead podcast.
We try to balance both humor and facts perfectly.
We also go on some pretty extraordinary squirrel hunts.
We can be found on iTunes and all other podcast apps.
Come over to Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram and see us at Color Me Dead Podcast for the latest updates and gory chat. We release on Wednesdays because on Wednesdays we wear murder.
Don't forget to spay and neuter your pets
and stay out of chalk lines.
Today's episode of Crime Crazy is brought to you by Audible. Now, fans of Crime Crazy Podcast can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/crimecrazy. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen on your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or your MP3 player. www.audibletrial.com/crimecrazy. Welcome to Crime Crazy, the weekly true crime podcast with Eryn Plime, and this week,
Michael Cole,
where we prove
we know almost nothing about crime,
but we're really crazy for a good true crime story. He threw me off by saying crime.
What am I supposed to say? I forgot.
Legal system.
We know nothing about the legal. Okay. Let's start over.
Welcome. Welcome to Crime Crazy, the weekly true crime podcast with Eryn Plime, and this week,
Michael Cole,
where we prove
we know nothing about the criminal justice system,
but we're still crazy for a good true crime story.
Did I get it right?
Pretty close.
Okay.
This is our special episode because Jordan had taken a preemptive sick day. And so Mike agreed to step in and be my Jordan for the week.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. The last time I did this, it was so much fun. I was jumping at the chance.
It was a ton of fun.
Yes.
So Mike was on our 4th episode, which was the Ouija board episode.
I'll never forget it.
But we actually have me. Hey guys, it's me. Tricked you. She decided she wasn't having a sick day after all. So instead, Jordan is hanging out and trying to fix my mic stand, which is broken. And they don't believe me that it's broken. How was your week?
Oh, fantastic. It was actually a really good week. I was really dreading it. Well, not dreading it. I was very concerned about how it was going to go. And then everything was fantastic.
Because you're a teacher, too, and we just started school.
Right.
So
it was my first week of
school. It could go
any
way.
Absolutely. But I've got wonderful kids this year.
That's great.
And I took off the 4th day of school.
Yeah, that's not fair.
Well, I figured my geometry students deserved a teacher who has seen Depeche Mode in concert. And
right.
I
mean, I think that's fair.
You know, I think they understand.
I don't really know who
and
that
they were
is,
just taking a pretest. That can be any warm body in the room. So
sure.
I didn't deny anybody any educational experience here. No, there was no. It's a victimless crime.
What are you saying? Assessment is not an educational experience? Wait, are you saying that we don't learn from assessing?
Oh,
like during the assessment, we don't learn?
I think so. I think that's exactly what I'm saying.
Wait.
Yes.
But doesn't our state do that totally backwards then? I'm so confused.
Right. Doesn't weighing the cow make it heavier?
I think it does.
It should. It had better.
I know that weighing myself makes me lighter.
Right.
No, it doesn't. That's when I stop drinking gin. Or start drinking gin. One or the other. All right. So, well, that's good. I'm a little jealous. My week was hard. It wasn't bad. It was just super busy and late nights and craziness. So
that's always a challenge.
It is, but now that the teachers are back and the kids are back,
right.
My job's about to start getting way easier. I'm just going to get to do the fun stuff for a really long time. So then the other question I always ask Jordan, which may not apply to you because, you know, Jordan's researching every week.
Right.
Every day, really.
Right.
Actually, just tirelessly. Her personal assistant is because she never knows what's in her notes until she starts reading them.
Right.
Right. Another personality of hers does the research, and then her podcasting personality is always surprised by what the crime is.
Well, that's
anyway. Did you have any stories that you're not going to tell us this week? Did you do any research and you're like, no, that's not the right one?
No, I knew exactly what I wanted to go for, and
Wow.
I assembled those words into the search engine and targeted right in.
Pulled up Wikipedia and he was ready to go.
I didn't even use Wikipedia.
Murderpedia?
No, the crime that I investigated had a Wikipedia link, and I clicked on it, and it was blank. It was a blank page, like it had been wiped clean.
Whoa.
I know.
Maybe that's the crime.
I know.
Oh my God. Guess what? I was a victim of a true crime this week.
Oh, no.
I was.
What?
So a week ago today, Saturday, I woke up and I was checking my emails and they're like, don't head to Walmart just yet. Your gold iPad is not quite ready for pickup. And I'm like, what the fuck? All right. First of all, not an Apple person.
Right.
Secondly, don't have the funds for an iPad. Third, not ordering gold.
Yeah, you're not going to get gold. Do they even know you?
Fourth, I don't live in California. So, Jose Yares apparently hacked into my, somehow got in my Walmart account or got my credit card information or something. Anyway, he bought himself a nice gold iPad.
Right.
So that was exciting. And I got to have a senior deputy come to my house and take a statement. So I was like,
was he cute?
Like, yeah, actually, it really was.
All right.
Thanks,
Jose.
It was really kind of awkward. And he came over and I was thinking, I bet a lot of people, if they called and I need to report a crime and the police officer was like, well, I need to come to your house to talk to you, would be like, can we meet at McDonald's? Like, do you have to come to my house?
Right.
Because he's coming over and I'm like, well, I mean, my house is a wreck because I have little kids. And,
but
but I don't have anything here that he would care about.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the majority of houses a policeman visits.
Oh, yeah.
On the bell curve, yours is probably on the positive side of the curve there.
I mean, he may have walked in and gone, I think there may have been another crime committed in here, like an abduction or something. There's a struggle.
There's a chalk line on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? Chalk outline.
Well, I mean, that's just there for decor. Right. That body's long since been cleaned up.
Right.
I got nothing else. So I guess we could start talking about
I anticipated that you were going to ask me if I had committed a crime this week.
And what would the answer have been?
Yes, if carbohydrates are a crime.
Oh, that's so
It was definitely a carb crime.
Kick you. Carbohydrates are not a crime. See Exhibit Ginger Ale and Gin.
Well, we went to a place in D.C. It was fantastic called Dangerously Delicious Pies.
You mentioned that.
It was phenomenal. It was so good.
Did you eat like 12 kinds of pie?
I felt like it. But no, I had a tomato, fennel, and sausage pie.
Just want you to know that's
pie.
not a pie. Although I do really
Oh, no,
like
it
savory.
was a pie, honey.
Okay.
It was
it's
delicious.
Okay.
And then my boyfriend Mike had a curry tofu pie, which was delicious.
Does he not eat meat?
He is an aspiring vegetarian. He
Okay.
does not eat beef or pork.
Okay.
And he occasionally will partake in poultry. I'm convinced the main reason he eats chicken is because his dog eats chicken, and he loves his dog and is going to cook his dog chicken. And so he will eat chicken.
Because it's already cooked.
Right. But
or because he wants to be closer to his dog. Like,
I
there's a fine
it's
line there.
I think mostly because it's already cooked.
Okay.
But he is, more than anyone I've ever met, he is pure of heart. And so I have no doubt his goal is to be a vegetarian one day.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's like the opposite of what Jordan does with her dogs, though, because her Mike wanted rice. And she said she wouldn't cook it for him because she had been cooking it for the dogs and she was all done cooking rice.
That's totally understandable. You can only cook so much rice in your life. Right.
Well, I didn't commit any crimes this week that I know of.
Did you commit any crimes in your heart?
Yeah, murder, like 30 times. Yeah, no, murder.
Murder. Yeah, well, you know.
Let's just leave it at that. No one we know. No one you know. No, don't be worried.
Right. This whole podcast is really just a giant research project so that the day when the day comes, right. We know exactly what we need to do. You're studying the best out there.
Here's what we've learned. Don't write it in a text message. Don't send it in an email. Don't tell everybody about your plans. Don't write a novel about it. Like, just shut up after you've killed the person.
Right.
So
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready
to begin the podcast, not to kill a person. I mean, probably both, but we'll never do one of those things.
Well, I mean, also like dismembering and all that kind of stuff. Like, I feel like there's a lot more steps, and I'm definitely not emotionally ready to do any of that. Oh, plus the killing part. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not into that. Okay, I'm slightly drunk. You should tell us the story.
All right, I'm slightly drunk too, so I should. There was so I'm going to give you a name.
I'm so ready. Can you pronounce it?
Yes,
Jordan usually butchers it. Can you butcher it?
Do you want me to butcher
You
it
don't have to be
deliberately?
Jordan. You can be yourself.
Okay. So I'm going to give you. I researched this name in many different places, but I'm going to read you the title of one of the sources: "The Strange Death of Zygmunt Adamski."
Of who?
Zygmunt Adamski. He was a
Ziggy Abdomen. Got
Ziggy
it.
Abdomen. Ziggy.
Poor Ziggy.
Yes.
All
Wait
right.
till you find out why. So
The strange death of.
yes.
Okay.
So here's the deal.
I feel like we've just had a spoiler.
He was
Spoiler, he dies.
Yes, and it strangely so.
Right.
This was in England. This was in a town near Yorkshire, or in Yorkshire, and he was a Polish immigrant,
Okay.
and he was not a young man. He was 67 years old when he died, and he lived with his wife Lottie, who is also a Polish immigrant.
Is Lottie a name that's generally short for something, or is that
Yes.
a name?
I'm going to pronounce it, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Ready?
Intentionally?
Yes. That way I have plausible well, not plausible deniability, but at least I have cover.
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't know how to pronounce it right, so you're just going to say, I'm doing it wrong on purpose.
Correct.
Okay.
If she were Greek, I believe her name would have been Leocadia.
Okay.
And Lottie, I suppose, is like
Easier to
a
say.
typical... When you hear people named Lottie, their proper name was Leocadia? Leocadia?
So their given name was unpronounceable gibberish, and no.
Unpronounceable to us. I'm
But it
sure
actually
for
is
Poles
probably
it was a very common
pretty.
name.
Well, right, and
Yeah,
it's a nice
Leocadia.
sound.
When I hear Leo in it, it's line. Anyway, she had multiple sclerosis.
Oh no!
Right, so-
and I'm making fun of her name.
That's because you're terrible. And she was... So she had multiple sclerosis, which doesn't have anything to do with the story, other than the fact that he was very dedicated to his wife. He was a very good man. He was very highly thought of in his community. And he one day was going to the market because his goddaughter was getting married the next day. And he was picking up some food for the feast that was going to take place after the wedding ceremony.
Okay.
This is a really good guy, 67 years old. And
I'm so sad for him.
guess what happened?
He died.
He was murdered.
Strangely. Oh no.
Well, we don't know if he was murdered or not. But
He died.
His body was found and he was dead. But there were some strange circumstances here.
Okay.
He was found in a train yard on top of a 12-foot pile of coal.
That's not where the market is.
No.
On top of a 12-foot pile of coal.
5
Do you think
days
it's-
later.
Oh my. Do you think it's difficult to climb a pile of coal? Like it would all shift and it'd be like climbing a pile of marbles?
Yes, and this pile of coal was not shifted.
Oh, so he was dropped there.
Maybe. And there was no coal dust on his clothing.
He was dropped very gently there.
And he left wearing what you would typically expect a gentleman to be wearing in England as they were
Bermuda
walking
shorts
into the
and a
market.
Hawaiian
He was
shirt,
wearing a
unbuttoned.
shirt and jacket and pants. But when he was found,
Oh no.
he was missing his watch, his wallet,
Mm-hmm.
and he had his jacket on, but not his shirt.
Wait. What? The watch and the wallet. Okay, somebody who killed him stole them like that. Okay, that's obvious. What did they want with the shirt? Was it like fine silk or something?
I don't know. No, I'm sure it wasn't fine silk, but I don't know what it was. And his clothes that were on him,
Uh-huh.
by police, it was described as if his clothes were replaced upon him as if by someone who didn't understand how to put clothes on. So his jacket was buttoned back, but it wasn't buttoned back the way a jacket you would expect for it to be buttoned. And his shoes were put on in a way that looked as if it was done by someone who didn't understand how shoes work.
Well, like on the wrong feet or backwards or like I'm trying to figure out.
I don't know.
You could button a jacket kind of inside out.
What
like if you made the buttons
Sure.
on the outside instead of the.
Or what I was expecting was like,
Yeah.
you know, when you know all those times you go to work and you're still drunk from the night before and you start to button up your shirt, but like you're off
can
one
confidently
button.
say that I have never done that.
Well, you're not a math teacher, so you know those times when you're like one button off from the bottom and you get to the top
Yeah,
and you're like,
because
why do I have another hole but I'm out of
Captain
buttons?
Kangaroo says button from the top or from the bottom.
Right. But sometimes, you know,
You just do it wrong.
sure. And then you end up at the top and you're all out of holes, but you still got a button. I'm picturing that kind of scenario with his jacket. And then
I
as
feel
far
like
as
that's
like
Mike's
socks,
problem.
like I don't know how you put socks on wrong, and then his pants were put on wrong. I don't know. All his clothes were put on wrong.
It's easier to put socks on wrong than shoes on wrong. I would
That's
think
true.
they
You could put
really
them on
only
upside down.
right when they really shoes only fit one
That's true.
way.
But
So he's probably dressed dead.
probably.
Ugh.
Now, here's the other strange thing.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, there's girl, you just wait.
I'm
So,
ready.
something else that was strange about his death was he was missing for 5 days before he was found.
Right.
And he was found on top of this 12-foot pile
Right.
of coal. And at this train station, the person who ran the train station, his son, who also worked there, was there like at 11:45 and saw nothing. And the
Oh.
body was found at 4:00.
Oh.
And
So it hadn't been there for 5 days.
No.
It was put there right before they found
No.
it.
And
Oh.
this was something that was strange to me, although it wasn't really. No one else maybe it's not strange, but you tell me. It was found face up.
I mean, I don't know. I guess.
Okay, we'll come back to that because I'll tell you what my thinking on that was in a little bit. But another strange thing. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Here's where it gets weird.
Uh-huh.
His beard only showed 1 day's worth of beard growth, and he left the house freshly shaven, and yet he had been gone 5 days.
Okay. So, my theory of the crime. I have it solved. You ready?
I hear you. I predict
Uh-huh.
that your theory,
Uh-huh.
I've got something that's going to keep it from being true.
From being true.
You ready?
You probably do, but here's my theory.
Go ahead.
Because I'm an expert. This is
Yep.
our 28th episode. 27th
you know
episode.
crime. You know crime.
I know crime.
Yep.
Episode 27. I can't even talk.
Yep.
My theory is that somebody kidnapped him and held him for a day before they killed him, or like maybe killed him slowly. So like his beard was still growing for 24 hours or whatever before he died.
Right.
Before it stopped growing.
Right.
Or really, doesn't your skin start to like shrink back so it looks like your hair is growing?
Oh.
So maybe they killed him right away. But either way,
Sure.
then they didn't know what to do with the body, or they
Right.
like had maybe buried him naked, and then they dug him up. They're like, this isn't going to work. So they took him to the train station yard thing, and they used whatever device you used to put the coal in the 12-foot pile and dropped him on top.
But he had no coal dust on him.
Well, they cleaned it first.
So you're saying,
They took him up in an airplane, and they dropped him on top.
but there would have been damage to his organs.
Well, I didn't know there was no damage to his organs because that was not included in the autopsy
True.
report.
True.
Oh, wait,
And-
Jordan's figured it out here.
And, okay.
Sorry, hold on. Side note, because I've been really thinking and listening. Okay, so I totally agree on that he was kidnapped and he was killed within the first day. So your skin does like recede back. So then it looks like kind of like, what is it, 5 o'clock shadow? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
So then it looked like that.
Right?
Then,
Yeah, I get 5 o'clock shadow like right around noon, basically.
that's Mike. He can shave, and then like 2 minutes later, all of a sudden he's
Right.
like, "Damn it!" But okay, anyway, back. So then I feel like they stripped him down because guess who actually kidnapped him? Aliens. Aliens took him, stripped him down, had no experience with clothing, tried to dress him back, and was like, "Shit." Then some other guy, like an alien guy, he was probably like a special one. He grabbed the shirt, and they were like, "Well, we can't take it back from him now."
Wait, a special guy grabbed the shirt?
Like a special alien.
Like, why was
like
he-
they can't take
like-
it back. He's important. He's the king. Like he's too much. So they're like, well, now we can't. Oh my god! No, I'm saying like he's like too important to the alien tribe, so now he has the shirt. They're not asking him for it back. He's killed too many people in his time. So then they were like, oh shit, okay, dress him back. So then they dressed him the best they could, and they beamed him down.
But they're aliens, so they clearly don't know how to put clothes on.
Exactly.
correctly.
So that's why they were like, well, shit, this is kind of what it looked like.
Right.
And then they beamed him down on top of the pile because they're like, well, it's just a big black hole because they can't see that it's coal. They think it's a hole. So then they're beaming him down on top of it. That's why there was no damage. That's why there was no dust. And that's why it took so long, because 5 days to us was really like 5 seconds to them. Thank you and good night.
Wait. Okay. You know those puzzles where you're like, you give part of a story and then you get to ask yes or no questions until you get it? Okay. So is the coal really Mike Cole?
Oh my gosh, no! That is a total coincidence. That's hilarious. No.
12
No. Yeah, it's 12 feet. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right, 12 feet.
Oh my God, I so hope your new principal listens to this. I'm going to call her.
So, it turns out that Jordan's theory is actually a widely held theory as to the theory of the crime. Yes. So, let me just add a couple other details here that's going to make Jordan's theory even more plausible. There were strange...
I have a problem with Jordan's theory.
There were strange... Is it the fact that there are aliens?
Yes, there were aliens in her story.
There were strange burn marks on the back of his head and his neck that also had a bizarre salve.
Taser.
They had a... what was the phrase? One of the sites had it. A sinister salve on them that apparently the person conducting the autopsy was not able to identify. But it looked as if he had small burn marks on the back of his head and his neck and on his shoulders.
Taser.
That were poorly treated with
Aloe?
some salve that was unable to be identified. Because you would think that they would be able to test it and go, oh, they put aloe on it. But
yeah,
the
but it's
salve
like
was
some
never identified.
Weird essential oil blend some hippie put on him.
So you...
Just isolated us. Half of our listening audience is like, what?
Right.
It was a cult.
It was a homeopathic cult.
Yes.
That used an...
well, they don't believe in modern medicine. So they have to be homeopathic. That's their only other option.
So it gets weirder.
I'm ready.
All right. So they were thinking, well, what's up with this guy? How did he end up here? So how did he end up on a 12-foot pile of coal with strange burn marks on the back of his neck? He's missing a shirt. His other clothes are put on incorrectly.
How did they get him down?
I guess I don't know. I don't know. I can't even picture like what a 12-foot pile of coal looks like. How steep it is. Is it loose? Like, is it going to be difficult to climb? I don't know.
Right.
But he was, and here's the thing: if you kill someone and you're gonna hide the body, are you gonna hide it on top of a 12-foot pile of coal in the middle of the day between 11:45 and 4 o'clock?
Right, when the sun is up, and like to go put it there is awfully ballsy, no matter who you are.
Is it ballsy or like
stupid
or right? So, needless to say, you know the British tabloids. Mm-hmm. This is before the internet. Oh, I neglected to mention this was in 1980 that this happened.
Oh, I wasn't born yet.
So there. Oh my gosh.
And neither was Jordan. She hadn't been born for years.
Guys,
this
you
is
young people.
Fantastic. Every episode, we're always like, "Well, Jordan wasn't born, or Jordan was 2. I was really old. Now I can say I wasn't born."
Well, Eryn, this is going to make you feel better because I had been born and was 6 years old. So when I
were
was
6 years
at the tender age of 6,
so old.
I'm so aged. So anyway,
6 is my favorite
This was
number.
before the internet. So the British tabloids were basically like the internet. They're, I mean, I'm an Anglophile. What's the word? I like UK, especially now that we've got idiot in charge of us in the United States.
Oh yes, because they're not afraid to say it and post it all over Twitter.
Right. So if there was ever a time to love Great Britain, United Kingdom, it's now. But anyway, so but their tabloid system,
make a place for me.
Their tabloid system once was essentially
amazing.
The crazy internet.
Right.
Like they would take things and run with
Reddit.
So naturally, a body found face up with clothes put on incorrectly and strange burn marks in the back of the neck. They believed what Jordan's theory was, which was that it was obviously an alien abduction.
Right.
Okay.
Obviously.
the police constable who was investigating this
Did he
crime-
write that in his report?
No.
Okay,
no.
that's good.
He thought, well, that's crazy. Why would anyone think such a weird thing?
Right.
So this guy,
I agree.
his last name was Godfrey, so he was Police Constable Godfrey. These are all by the name. Oh, it is a good It is a good. Like, it's a gay club in D.C. Oh no, that's in Godfrey's is in Richmond. Yeah, I'm thinking Ziegfeld's. That's in D.C. I have no idea.
I
how
went
know
to
where
the
all these gay
corner
clubs
pocket. That was a good gay club.
Corner Pocket's not a gay.
No, there's.
That's
there
actually a
is
really
one.
good name for one.
No, it is. There is one. There is. I saw a drag show there. It's not the one in Williamsburg.
Where is the gay corner pocket?
Hampton.
There's a gay corner pocket in Hampton.
There was 15 years ago. I don't know. I did Jello
let's
shots
go.
there and watched a drag show that was really bad,
Oh, we should totally.
but was really fun.
That sounds fun. So okay, wait a minute. Trevor Parker, by the way, was the name of the guy. These are all very British names. So, Police Commissioner Godfrey was the one who found the body.
Yes.
He was like, there's obviously a crime here that's been committed.
Well, yeah. There's a dead
Right.
dude.
And he did some research, and he found that on his way to market, that's
That
what,
little piggy.
right.
Uh-huh.
On his way to market, this guy stopped and talked to people, and he was in a cheerful mood. His goddaughter was getting married the next day, so he was happy.
And he sounds like a super nice guy, but everybody liked him.
Right. And so there was no reason to think that anything was going to go wrong. But there was a family member who he was at odds with, who I couldn't get a sense of what it was about, but I think that this family member was maybe not treating his wife very well.
Oh.
Not Adamski's wife, but was treating his own wife very well.
Oh, not the
Like-
not the poor woman with MS.
Correct.
But so he was
Correct. So
okay.
so
he was
Adamski
not
and his
being
wife.
as good a husband as Piggles or whatever his name was.
Correct. So
What was
Adams,
his name? Ziggy,
Ziggy.
Yeah.
So Ziggy Abdomen.
not Piggles.
So Ziggy Abdomen and his wife had taken in this woman into their house to protect her.
Oh man, well that's why he's at odds.
So
Like
now
that's
there's
not okay.
motive. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But and so
I mean,
yeah,
it's okay for them to take her in. It's not okay for them to need to take her in. That's
Correct.
what I just wanted to clarify.
So the theory of the crime at that point was that Ziggy Abdomen had said he was going to market, but he was actually going to confront the husband of this woman he had taken in.
Before his goddaughter's wedding.
I know, but you
That's
know how
poor
things
ti-
can be. You know
I know
how
that's
things
poor
can go.
timing.
And so the idea was he had gone to confront them, things had gone wrong, and that this guy had abducted him and maybe kept him in a shed for 5 days. But that still didn't explain, and
The beard.
kept him in a shed for 5 days, killed him, maybe
Right.
at some point in those 5 days didn't know what to do with the body, and then deposited the body. But that doesn't explain so much. It doesn't explain the strange burn marks. If there are strange burn marks, why would there be some sort of salve on them? Why would you dispose of the body on a top of a 12-foot pile of coal? 12 pile.
12 pile.
Yes. The gin is kicking in. So here's where it gets weird. So this guy Godfrey, the police commissioner, 3 weeks later, he's investigating some missing sheep, which apparently is a common occurrence
It's also
in Yorkshire,
in his job
England.
description. He's like,
Correct.
well, last week I had a murder, but this week it's sheep.
Right. And so
It's just ups and downs.
while he goes to find these missing sheep, his car stops working, and
Isn't
he
that the
sees
shepherd's job?
You would think, but well, not in this day and age. I mean, exactly.
I don't know. Are they microchipped? Just scan all the sheep. Go ahead.
You're such a computer person. So on his way to find these missing sheep, he finds a glowing object levitating in the sky, and he's like, "What is this?" And so he stops and he draws it
By
and everything.
definition, a UFO.
Correct. Technically, right. It may or may not have been aliens, but it was for sure unidentified.
UFO, right.
And it's levitating, and he sees
levitating.
and he sees leaves underneath it blowing. The police commissioner, who happens to be
It's
investigating
an
this crazy
early
crime,
hovercraft.
sees something levitating, and seconds later, he's on the other side of it, and he's like, "Well, what happened?" And he looks down at his watch, but 15 minutes have elapsed. So
he hallucinates and passes out, and then he stands up and he's like, "What happened?"
You say hallucinate. The internet says, after his hypnotic regression therapy, that he remembers a tall, handsome man and a short, ugly man in a craft.
And one of them was
had
wearing
asked
a
him some
stolen
questions,
shirt.
and so this gets really weird. So the tabloids grabbed onto the alien thing right away, and then this
Sure.
thing happens to this guy.
Right.
It turns out this guy's had experiences his whole life, which were revealed under hypnotic regression therapy. And so
Wait, this is the police inspector, whatever.
the police commissioner who was investigating the crime.
Okay, all right, I'm back on track.
And also there were strange lights found in in surrounding areas before and after this event.
You mean like seen, or like they were like, oh, look at this strange light I just picked up?
Oh no, strange lights in the sky.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes. And and this guy, this police commissioner Godfrey, in a previous experience with suspects that he was trying to detain, had been kicked in the groin.
Oh my!
And had undergone an injury on the job, so he was missing a testicle.
Oh my!
And was unable to have sexual relations with his wife properly. But shortly after this alien visit, was able
to have
a
sexual
experience
relations
with his wife,
or
and his wife got pregnant.
Well, 'cause-
Shortly after his 15 minutes
wow.
that went missing.
So they were like, "Oh, let me pick you up and fix you." Like, we know what to do for that. We do that all the time.
Right. Well, they need him to have an alien baby so that they can go back later.
Yep, I'll say now there's a seed on Earth.
This is how it
for
starts,
them to
people.
come back. Guys, you need to watch Guardians of the Galaxy. It's exactly the story of Guardians of the
Right.
Galaxy 2.
If the Marvel universe has taught us nothing, it's that this is how it begins. And so there's this whole other side thing that the police commissioner.
More story. Never mind.
I haven't seen the first episode yet.
No, it's the season with the alien baby.
Oh, right, in the asylum.
That's what it is.
It's absolutely like this is common knowledge, Eryn. Like I'm a little disappointed that you're skeptical about it. Like.
That
You're going to
you-
be one of the
wait.
15 people surprised when aliens land and say, yeah, we've been impregnating your people for years. And
I will, but you know what? Google and Amazon and I are just going to stand there and take the aliens down.
yeah, I hope you're right.
I'm gonna be like, take me.
Oh, this was something my nephew went to the concert with us, and so this is a new thing I'm going to start trying. Whenever my answer is in the affirmative, I'm going to answer like, it better be or you better be. So, like, if you're like, hey, are you going out with us tonight? I'm going to say, well, I better be. Like, that's my new thing.
That sounds awfully aggressive.
It better be. See, it's awesome. It's awesome. So that's my new thing. So anytime I don't do it, catch me. But anyway.
Are you trying to, like, be young and hip?
I better be.
Okay.
See? Tell me that wasn't. So anyway, thanks. All right. So okay, so obviously now at this point, either this guy was abducted
Or he's insane.
Or he was murdered by this guy.
Oh, right. That guy. Yeah,
So,
Piggy.
Right.
Pickles?
The guy,
Ziggy.
yeah, no, Ziggy was the victim. So
So
the
he was
guy,
either abducted or murdered.
Right. So the family member who had trouble with Ziggy because he took in this family member's wife.
Yes.
Maybe he really was a crazy person that killed him, but then decided to put his clothes on incorrectly and climb a 12-foot pile.
So that the
of pole.
tabloids would be like, oh, it's aliens.
Sure.
It works.
So, like, if you kill someone, just make it look a lot like aliens, and that'll distract everybody about it. But then here's the weird thing.
go.
So at this point, I'm totally Team Jordan. I'm like, this dude was abducted by aliens. I don't care what
Right.
anyone says. But there's this thing. I know. I said uh-oh too because I was like, is that even a thing? There's this thing called moxibustion. Have you ever heard of moxibustion?
No, I have never heard of
Okay.
moxibustion.
So people after the fact. So you have like the whole insurgency of people who are saying, "Oh my gosh, it's aliens." But then
Yeah.
you're going to have the backlash of
Oh
naysayers
my gosh, it's not
saying
aliens.
that are saying it is totally not aliens. There's a perfectly rational explanation.
Right, just look a little harder.
Turns out this guy had arthritis, and he did something called moxibustion,
Uh-huh.
which is this thing where apparently one source on the internet said moxibustion was where you light cotton balls on fire and put it on your skin, and it's kind of like acupuncture. And I'm like, who in their right mind is going to put...
Yeah, but to be fair, like, I mean, I've done acupuncture and I really liked it, but who in their right mind is going to shove
Well,
sharp
sure.
objects in them when they don't need it to be?
Right, so some people are saying, well, it was actually just the moxibustion, and maybe he went and stopped and got a moxibustion treatment, and
On
it
the
went
way.
wrong, and it caught his shirt on fire. So they destroyed his shirt, but put his jacket back on him.
And
And tried to treat it with salve, and in a hurry, climbed a 12-foot pile of coal.
Well, okay, that part is weird. But, like, put his clothes on in a hurry, panicked, and then they were like, where are we going to put him? Let's hide him on that big hill.
So this thing, moxibustion, which is, maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about that. And then there are other people that are talking about ball lightning. Oh, he was just wandering. He was just going to the market, and there was ball lightning, which is a similarly controversial paranormal phenomenon, and it hit him from behind, and that's what burned his neck, and then he was confused.
Him up on top of the pile.
Well, the lightning ball contingency is saying that he was confused because he got hit by ball lightning and climbed the 12-foot pile of coal so he could look around at his surroundings and see where he was, which is a little ridiculous. I almost think aliens are more likely than that.
Yeah, I don't know that either of those are great, but I still feel like.
Right.
I don't know.
So do you know what they found happened?
What happened? Oh, wait, they know what happened?
No, nobody knows.
Oh, well then, what?
I was just being a dick. Yeah. No, nobody knows what happened. So it's an unsolved case. And is it murder or not? And if it is murder, then why did this police commissioner have all this strange stuff happen to him? And how does his wife get pregnant, even though he was missing a testicle after getting kicked in the groin? And
well, okay, yeah, but missing a testicle makes it way less likely that you'll get pregnant.
But he wasn't. I think there was also some other stuff too, because
he just had to heal.
It said specifically he was wasn't able to have normal sexual relations with his wife.
Normal sexual relations.
Yeah, what are normal sexual relations, really, people? I mean, come on.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
I'm still going with taser. Were there tasers in the 80s?
Do
you would know
aliens
better
use
than
tasers?
me.
Were there tasers in the aliens? I would know better than you. Oh, because I was alive.
Yes.
I was 6 years old, though. I wasn't tasered. No, I'm thinking the tasers really hit their peak in the late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
That's when I remember hearing about them, but that's like when I remember most things, because that's when I was a teenager.
Right. Well, and you wouldn't tase a 67-year-old man.
Well, sure you would if you're a bad guy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, I
One
wouldn't
wouldn't,
tase
sure.
them.
Right. Fair enough.
Jordan might.
Yeah.
But there would be some sort of break in the skin. It wouldn't just be burns.
I thought it just left little marks.
Last time I got tased, I had scabs.
I'm sorry,
I'm just
what?
kidding. I've never been tased, people. But you would think, I mean, it's got to stick to you somehow, so you would think that it would be more than just burn marks. And I wouldn't tase you and then be like, oh, let me put unidentified salve on it.
If you were trying to blame it on aliens and you knew the tabloids would fall for it, you might. Maybe he was killed by a really smart person. Okay.
So that's pretty much it, Eryn. So I would, on my coordinate plane of crime and crazy, where the x-axis represents the severity of the crime and the y-axis represents the crazy, I would say this isn't particularly, other than the fact that there was potential murder here.
Well, there was absolute murder, whether it was done by extraterrestrials or a human.
Or he could have just climbed the tower of coal and had a heart attack.
Did they ever determine what he died from? Did they not autopsy him?
Oh, the autopsy report said heart attack, but they weren't sure.
Okay, so his heart stopped.
That's what they said. But that's what they always say. That's what I would say. If I didn't know, I would be like, oh, it was a heart attack.
So, but if he had gotten zapped with a taser-like instrument, then...
That they didn't have in the 80s, right? Go on.
Well, but you still had electricity.
Did they? They better.
Yeah, and...
See, watch this, Jordan.
That didn't make sense.
It better not. See, Jordan, this is awesome.
Mike's about to be fired.
I better be.
You better be or you better not be. He's like, I told my story. I can go. We're done. You could still get zapped by electricity, and that could cause like your heart to. That's how they make your heart beat again. That's how it could mess up your heart, and you could die.
I would say crime. This is level 2. Crazy. This is level 9.
I feel like crazy is definitely 9 or 10.
Yay.
I feel like crime is higher than 2 because either way, there's a guy who showed no signs of dying who is now dead, and it's probably somebody's fault.
You respect human life way more than me, I realize. Now
Yikes.
I feel bad.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Actually, I just have a plug. So, we're sponsored by Audible.
I love Audible.
Actually, I really love Audible.
I do too. I really do.
use it all the time. And so basically what happens is if you are a fan of ours and you go to audibletrial.com/crimecrazy, they'll give you a free book.
What?
So if you've never signed up for Audible or like you haven't been there in a really long time, you can go on and you can start your trial. They give you a month free. They don't charge you for a month.
That's awesome.
And then if you want to cancel, you can cancel, but you're not going to cancel because it's really great
So
to
you'd
have other people read to you.
You would have to be totally crazy then to not take this opportunity.
Okay, so you guys might cancel, but anyway, usually we do some sort of like book review kind of thing. I did download, we talked a couple episodes ago about the Louise Penny detective books.
Right.
There's like a series. So I have downloaded one. I haven't started listening yet because I want to actually pay attention to it. And I can't do that while I'm working. So
Well, Audible is just a thing, like if you have a long commute to work,
oh my gosh,
that
yes.
would make the commute go by really quickly. And,
Yes.
you know, in this day and age, people have a hard time finding time to read. That's the perfect solution.
Absolutely. So audibletrial.com/crimecrazy. And not only will you get your free book and your free 30-day trial, but you also get to support our podcast.
That's
and we will love you
fantastic.
forever.
How awesome is that?
So really, if you sign up, let us know because we'll like send you something cool. We like to send cool things out. That's like our favorite thing to do.
That's fantastic.
Okay, back on track. I have a story that's going to blow your mind, although it's a mystery like yours, but it's not a mystery like yours.
Okay.
So I thought it was going to blow your mind, and now it might seem a little mundane.
What?
But it's still pretty great.
Yours might be real, though, whereas mine is like...
Oh, no, mine
probably
is
not
totally real.
Right.
Mine is absolutely real. So Mary Virginia Avery is in a true crime podcast Facebook group, and she posted, oh my gosh, somebody do this story. Like it was really cool. Like look into it. And I was like, oh, well, Crime Crazy's totally got this.
Yeah.
So I looked it up and it did not disappoint. So shout out to her because this is a great story that I had never heard of. So I'm claiming it for Crime Crazy. You guys can do your own versions, but ours is best and first.
There you go.
So here we go.
We've got the best listeners.
That's true. All right. So our story begins with a Nebraskan family, Bill and Opal Arnold, and their children.
Can I just pause for 1 second? I swear I'm going to let you tell your story without interrupting you. But
you're
if there
not.
was ever a name for a couple, like no harm intended to citizens of Nebraska.
Right.
But if I were writing a novel and I had a couple that lived in Nebraska and I was like, what should I call them? I think that's exactly the name that I would decide on.
Here are their children's names.
Oh, no. I bet they're Old Testament. That's my prediction.
William Jr.
No, that's not Old Testament.
Well, no, but it's Bill Jr.
Yeah, right.
But he went by his middle name, Leslie or Les, because he didn't want to be
Okay.
Bill Jr.
Right.
And then their other son was Jimmy.
Oh, those are typical. Okay.
Yeah, but I feel like they're all sort of like,
Nebraskan?
well, or at least like this was in the 1950s. Like they're very
Oh, yeah.
leave it to Beaver
And-
kind
right.
of names.
And that I just read an article about that. How in that generation it was very typical to name your kids names that would not stand out, as opposed to now where you want to name your kids names that are
Nevaeh,
unique.
and everybody has named their kid
Right,
Nevaeh.
right.
And my God, if you're going to give your kid the name Nevaeh, which you should not,
Yeah.
at least spell it right.
It should at least be heaven backwards.
Right, because if it's not heaven backwards, what was the point?
Well, yeah. And while we're on the topic, as a teacher, like we've how many kids have you taught, Eryn? Like we've probably taught
Hundreds.
like 1,000. I think,
yeah.
I think I've taught like 1,500 kids. So I've had a good opportunity to sample like names. Don't
Right.
name your child after a virtue.
Oh my God,
Don't
no.
name your
They're
kid
gonna do
Charity
exactly
or Chastity
the
or
opposite.
Christian
Oh, Chastity.
or Harmony or anything like that.
No,
You're just destining
No, you
them to
are.
become strippers
Well,
or
especially when they're
horrible
see,
people.
okay, so that's advice. I'm on a board that talks a lot about names, and that's advice they give. They're like, look, no matter what, my children will have to change their name to become a stripper.
Right.
If you don't have to change your name to become a stripper, rethink the name. All right, so anyway, we have Bill and Opal Arnold and William and Leslie. William, Leslie, and Jim. Leslie really went by Les, which I would too.
Yeah.
And Jim was either Jim or Jimmy. I have him called Jim all throughout this, but I think a lot of people probably called him Jimmy. So when the story starts in 1957, Les is 16 and his little brother is 13. Okay. So, and actually I don't know why the story starts in 1957 because it really starts in 1958 when they're 17 and 14, but we're just going to ignore that and go on. So their life was really normal, like almost sort of an idyllic, like perfect little, well, yeah, but even like sitcom family kind of life. So Bill, the dad, owned a branch of Watkins Products, and they sold like door-to-door stuff.
Sure.
So like vacuum cleaners and spices and stuff, which was a...
Wait. Vacuum cleaners and spices?
Those were two of the products his company sold.
Okay.
I think...
Like,
or if
let's
you
suppose you spill some cloves. Well, then you can vacuum it with these...
Right. Right. Well, they had to buy so many spices to show how their vacuums worked. They were like, we should just sell these two. I don't know.
Okay.
There were like 3 products listed
So
that company sold, and those were 2 of them.
Those were 2 things that were brand new in the 50s.
They were. Well, but what they did have in common is they're both household objects, which was like a big thing. Well, because it was like post World War II, and anybody who had money is like spending just tons of money on shit they don't need around the house, like a
cardamom.
new vacuum.
Right.
Cardamom.
We have
Fennel.
disposable income, honey. Let's buy some cardamom and marjoram.
Spiffy new vacuum
Right.
cleaner.
And vacuum cleaner.
So he owned a branch of this very successful company. And Opal stayed home with the kids because that's what you did in.
Right.
However, there is a little bit of a difference because Opal, even though she was like the stay-at-home mom and whatever else, she was the one who wore the pants in the family. Like she was the one that really ruled the roost.
Sure.
So we'll get back to that.
Right.
Like any Nebraskan mom.
Right. She ran a tight ship.
She did, and we'll come back to that. But so their house, which you can actually see pictures of online, it's adorable. It's like this cute little 1950s house. Like, actually, you know what it reminds me of? And this is so dumb, but in Harry Potter, like Privet Drive,
Right.
I imagine their house was like all of those houses. Like that's how I picture this family. Is
Typical
the Dursleys.
Suburbia.
So suburbia.
Right. Post World War II.
Yep.
Right.
Cute everything. She probably wore an apron all
White
the time.
picket fence.
Uh-huh.
Like Edward Scissorhands.
Right.
They had a
Edward Scissorhands.
Oh God, what was their car? I didn't write down what kind of car they had, but they
I bet
had
it
a
was-
new car.
I bet it was American.
Oh, it was definitely
For
American.
sure.
So she stayed home and took care of the kids. They had an adorable house. It was really close to a really popular racetrack in the area. And so they said like at night you could hear the horses whinnying in the barn. And like it was just this perfect little picturesque whatever.
I'm ready to move to Nebraska.
No, you're not. There are no trees there.
Ew.
None. It's just all flat. Like you cross the Nebraskan line and it's like, oh, no more trees, no more hills. And then you cross it on the other side and it's like immediately there are trees. Like the
What?
welcome to whatever sign is nailed to a tree.
Why don't they just plant some trees in Nebraska?
I don't know. I think trees are illegal there. Okay, to be fair,
I'm sorry.
disclaimer, I've been to Nebraska one time and we just drove through it and it was a very stressful trip.
That's totally enough to make judgments about them.
I think so too. But I'll tell you what, if you're from Nebraska, you want to disagree with me, come join our Facebook group. We have a lot of fun there. Okay. Moving on. All right. So they were really well off because of Dad's business. They had a new car. They had a black and white TV. Like everything was great. Les's temper was not well known outside of his family. At school, he was like a great kid. He was a solid B student. He was into sports and music. He was in ROTC. Music was actually his passion. Like that was his thing.
Right.
But at home, he had a real temper. For example, he was into model airplanes.
Right.
But if he built a model airplane and it was not exactly perfect, he would just smash it. Like he just couldn't handle it. Like one time he was waxing the family car and the wax wasn't sticking properly or whatever. And so he dented the roof of the car because he got mad and he punched it. I mean, I do that sometimes too.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
This is bad.
It's bad.
Poor
Well,
parents,
so
yeah.
here's where it all sort of came from. Oh, well, actually, let me tell you one more example, and I'll tell you where it came from. He would beat his little brother up.
What? Oh,
Yes.
that's kind of an important thing.
Right, that's why I had to tell it to you before I told you where it came
Right.
from. So he would beat up Jim. He would even like put socks on his hands so that when he beat Jim, it wouldn't leave marks. Like it hurt, but it wouldn't
Wait,
leave
what?
marks. Yeah,
That works?
I guess.
No, it's a sock.
Try it with your kids on Monday.
You put socks on your hands and it doesn't leave marks?
I guess. Well, it's like
Where do you
soap in
learn
a
that?
bag. I don't know.
That's pretty
Isn't
cool.
soap in a bag a thing?
Oh, that's a thing I know from military movies where like they would fill a sock full of bars of soap and then
Yeah.
beat you with it and it wouldn't leave marks.
right. So I
Like
think
if
socks
you screwed up and the whole unit had to do
is
push-ups
pissed
because
at
you screwed up.
right?
Right.
Or like prison. I thought it was a prison thing. Is it
I don't
a prison
remember
thing?
that happening.
I think it's. What do you mean you don't?
Just
You've never
kidding.
been to
I'm
prison.
Totally joking.
So you'd put socks on his hands so the marks wouldn't show.
Of course.
Jim believed this abuse was because Les really resented his parents for having Jim in the first place. So they were only 3 years apart, but apparently Les had this like feeling that if he had been good enough, like he felt he was, they never would have had a second child. Why would they even need Jim? They had him.
You know, maybe that's because his name was literally Les.
So yeah, he believed that he was really jealous. And of course, this jealousy also caused conflicts between Les and his parents. Les felt like his mom was really domineering and unfair. And to be fair,
It sounds like she was.
it sounds like she may have been. Like she
Right.
would have him mow the lawn like 3 times because it wasn't perfect.
That's totally not fair.
That's not cool. And he really believed that she preferred Jim. And even some of the neighbors said that Jim was treated like an only child. And there are family photographs, and it's just the 3 of them. And Les is not even in the family photograph, even though he totally would have been home. He's still a kid. It is so it's the Dursleys.
Can
That's
you
what's going
imagine-
on.
Can you imagine being in a family and it's like time for the family picture, but not you?
Not you.
Not you. Hey, you little kid we call Les. Like,
Hey, Bill Jr., get out.
yeah, go away so we can take a family picture.
Yup.
No wonder this kid ended up doing
Put
something.
this in the car.
I don't even know what this kid did, but I'm sure he did something horrible, and I also
the
am also sure it's
victim.
not his fault.
He's the victim.
Yeah.
No, he's not. Okay. So
I can just imagine. Can you just go put this in the car? Take the picture.
we're smiling now. No, I swear, it's totally the Dursleys. Like, this is just Harry Potter. This is what would have happened to Harry if he had not become a wizard at the age 11.
Right.
This would have been his family story
Oh my
instead.
gosh.
So, one of the biggest problems in the house was Les's steady girlfriend, Crystal, who everybody called Chris. But like Crys, which is a terrible way to spell Chris. Les was in love with her, but his mom thought the whole family was trash, and she wasn't afraid to say that, and even like say it when Chris could hear her. So, yeah. So apparently Chris's dad like drove a truck or something for a living, and she didn't consider that a good enough job, and so the whole family was just trash, and she didn't want them to be together.
Oh my gosh.
So, mom's a bitch, Les has
Right.
a temper, Jim is a spoiled only child, and dad is probably always at work. That's where we stand. So, on the night of September 27th, 1958, which was a Saturday night,
And I wasn't born yet.
and Mike was like a few days away from being born.
Oh my gosh.
No, not really. Anyway, Les had planned a date with Chris. His parents had given him permission to use the family car. He was going to take her to a drive-in movie. They were going to watch a double feature, some horror films, which I think he's got bad taste, but whatever.
Sure, right. Well, no, you want to take your date on a horror film because then she gets scared and then she
Cuddles
holds
up to
on
you.
to you. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
classic.
see, I would get scared and mad, and the date would be over. The end. It wouldn't work with me.
Right.
But anyway, perhaps this is going to work with Chris. So he had this whole date planned, and it was all fine. Like, he'd gotten permission for it. Everything was fine.
Right.
So about 11 o'clock that morning, he's on the phone with Chris, maybe talking about plans, or I got the feeling they just kind of talked on the phone all the time.
Right.
And so he's
They
taken...
live in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing to do.
Sure.
So he has taken the phone into his room, and he would like drag it had a really long cord, and he dragged the phone cord under the door so that he could close the door and they could have some privacy while they talked.
Sure.
Like every teenager wants to do.
Naturally.
Well, his mom saw the cord going under the door and did not approve. Plus, she doesn't approve of the relationship at all. And so she bursts into the room and says, anything said behind closed doors isn't worth saying. And then she called Chris that no good girl, and Les was pretty sure that Chris could hear it.
Oh.
So Les gets pissed. Yeah.
Of course.
And
we know he has a temper.
He has a temper.
Right.
Deserved or not, he has a temper.
Sure.
He only has a temper at home.
Okay.
At school, he never got in trouble. Like, one of the things they said is the only time he was ever written up for any sort of infraction was one day he forgot to wear a belt, which was against, like, dress code policy. And so they wrote him a whatever for not having a belt.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. But he's totally able to control it, which was the part that I thought was interesting. Like, all of the problems are at home, so it makes sense that's where he would get angry. But I'm sure that things went wrong at school, too.
Sure.
And yet he never had an outburst there. It was only in his home.
Okay.
Which I realize is typical for a lot of kids. Like, if my kid's going to misbehave, it's going to be for us and not for other people.
Sure.
But it proves that he can control himself.
Which, as a teacher, I appreciate. If you're going to be an asshole, save it up and be it at home.
Well, yes, because that's where it's deserved.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I feel like that really doesn't come to his defense very much. That if he's capable of behaving and not making rash, impulsive decisions at school.
When he screws up, it really is his choice.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so here's what happens. So Les gets pissed and they have an argument. And in the end, Opal's like, well, now you can't take the car and go on your date. Like, that's canceled. Just call her back and be like, sorry, I can't come. Right, which is a typical mom response.
Sure.
Like, you're back talking me. Okay, I'm going to take away the thing you want, and we're going to solve this problem. So a couple times he tries to cool off. Like, she sends him to his room, and then he comes back out, and they fight again. And so she's like, well, go outside and cool off. And so he does. He takes a long walk.
Right.
But while he's cooling off on this walk, instead of, like, suddenly realizing the wrong of his ways, which I guess is what his mom was hoping, he instead comes up with a plan.
Oh.
And the plan is this. He's going to make his mom change her mind about the car. And since he can't do it by being a wonderful child because she doesn't respond to that, he's going to do it by making her scared. So he goes back in. He sneaks into his parents' closet. He grabs the .22 Remington rifle that he and his dad used to hunt rabbits. And he says his plan was to go back into where his mom was in the kitchen. Go back into the kitchen and, like, scare her into letting him go. Be like, no, I'm really serious about this. I'll shoot you if you don't let me go. And then she's going to say, oh, honey, you can use the car and everything will be great, right? Because he's a 17-year-old boy.
Right.
So he goes to confront her in the kitchen, but instead of showing any fear at all, she taunts him. She laughs at him, and she goes, what are you going to do? Shoot me?
Oh, my gosh, Nebraska mom.
So Les pulls the trigger.
Oh, no.
And the gun is loaded. Whether or not he loaded the gun becomes a really important part later on. But at this moment, the gun's loaded. His mom falls to the ground, and she's not dead. She's wounded, and so she's still on the ground. And he's like, I know that she was in pain, and I didn't want to hurt her, but in my head, all I could see was her still laughing at me. So he pulls the trigger 5 more times into her chest.
Oh, no.
So then she's like laying on the floor, her last breaths, and he's like, oh my God, what have I done? And so he kind of leans over her and he's trying to tell her that he's sorry and he didn't mean it. Like, this just happened and he didn't intend to kill her, and he's feeling horrible and shocked and whatever else. And his dad walks through the door. And his dad sees the scene in front of him and immediately goes, Les, what have you done?
Right.
And so then he's running toward his wife. And then there's some, like, I didn't find this terribly convincing because it seemed awfully convenient. But Les says that as he's, like, running towards his wife, he tried to hit Les. And after he leaned over and saw that his wife was dead, he came back to beat him again. And that's why Les shot him 6 times in the chest.
Oh, no. Les.
So, both of his parents die in the kitchen dining room area within feet of each other, and they're both dead.
Oh.
And then there's this 17-year-old boy standing over them with a gun, and he's just in shock. He goes into the living room so that he doesn't have to see them, and he cries for a while. And then he's like, okay, I have to do something. Like, I don't want to go to jail for the rest of my life. I have to do something. So he comes up with another brilliant plan because, you know, he's like on a roll with brilliant plans here.
Oh, no.
So first he takes...
brilliant to a 17-year-old
oh my God.
is not normal brilliant.
No. Well, I mean, his first brilliant plan ended up with 2 people dead.
Right.
So...
Right.
So he pulls his parents' bodies through the kitchen and down the stairs into the basement. And then he cleans up. And like there was a rug, and he rolls up the rug, and he like puts it away, and he cleans up the floor, and he gets rid of all the blood and whatever else. Like I imagine there had to be a ton of blood.
I imagine.
Right? Six rifle shots to the chest of each person.
Yeah.
So then he calls a family friend, Rose Grossman. And he says...
Jordan just laughed. I think that's Rose Grossman.
She's like, no, I'm going to defend my laughing
Yeah.
right there.
We're
It could be Grossman.
No, it's Grossman. Go ahead, continue.
Okay, so Rose. So he tells her that he has a family, a grandparent. I can't talk. He has grandparents that live not too far away, but he calls and he's like, so my grandpa is like, he's senile, and he got on a train and he was supposed to be going to California or somewhere, and they stopped and it wasn't his stop, but he got off and now he's lost, and my parents just found out, and so they have jumped on a train to go help people look for him because he's confused and we're really worried, and so, I'm fine to stay here by myself. I'm 17. I'm practically a grown-up, but Jim is really too young. So they asked if you could just watch him while they're gone.
This is a smart kid.
He's kind of a smart kid.
Yeah.
For right now. What would you have said?
I instead would have been like, Rose, oh my God, my senile grandpa took a train here and thought that the people living in this house weren't his son and or daughter and shot them both, and I don't know what to do with it. Like, what happens now? I would have pinned it on the grandpa. Sorry, Grandpa.
All right, so that actually probably would have served you better, except for a part that's coming up where there's some, like, I don't know if Grandpa is senile. I don't know if that was like part of his tall tale or if like Grandpa really is senile, but obviously he did. That's not what happened. He didn't get lost in his parents' house. Anyway, she believes it because Les is a stand-up, like unless you live with him, he's a stand-up kid. So of course she has no reason to doubt this at all. Like, of course his parents in an emergency situation would have been like, I know you can handle this. Make sure your brother's taken care of. We're going to be back in a couple days. Like, just hold down the fort.
Right.
So she takes Jim in. Well, actually what happens is Jim comes home and he comes in the house, but of course Les has like cleaned everything up. I guess he doesn't notice the missing rug, but really what 14-year-old boy would notice a missing rug?
Sure.
So he doesn't suspect anything. And after he's been home for just a little while, Les is like, look, something came up and Mom and Dad had to leave suddenly and you're supposed to go stay with Rose and I'm going to drive you over there. And he drives him over there and drops him off. And then he comes back home and he cleans up.
Right.
Because he's got a date.
Oh.
So he takes Chris to the drive-in movie double feature.
Right.
And then they go to a drive-in burger place. Lots of driving going on.
What else is there to do in Lincoln, Nebraska?
Right. And then they go back to Chris's house and they hang out with their family for a while. And then it's evening, it's late, it's not appropriate for him to be there anymore, so he goes home. But when he gets home, he realizes he can't be in the house with his dead parents' bodies. Like, that's too creepy for him.
Right.
So he's going to sleep in the car. But it's end of September in Nebraska.
Oh.
So he doesn't last very long in the car. It's too cold. So he finally goes into the house. He runs to his bedroom, slams the door, turns the radio all the way up, and like tries to get some sleep in the house. So, next morning is Sunday. So he goes to church because that's what you do on Sundays.
Right. Wait. He goes to church without his parents.
Yeah, all by himself.
Okay.
But the sermon happens to be on sin and crime.
Right.
And partway through the sermon, he bursts into tears and he has to leave early. Yep.
Can I just really quickly?
Yeah.
I feel bad for this kid. I mean, like, obviously he should not have murdered his parents. Obviously. I mean, I'm not condoning.
Never have to say.
Right. There are no circumstances under which you should ever murder your parents. But I have to say, I'm feeling really bad for this kid.
Yeah.
Okay. So he goes to church anyway, and he feels so guilty about murdering his parents that when his preacher is talking about
like sin and crime and
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He can't even handle it.
This poor kid.
I do feel really...
I mean, his poor parents, right?
Right.
But,
well, and it sounds like Dad, there may have been nothing wrong with that other than he was probably really busy and away a lot.
Right. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I am not at all saying that this kid was justified in murdering his parents.
No.
Right.
Especially not over, like, a date. Because even with all the other problems, like, that's the triggering event was he wasn't allowed to take the car and he wanted to go on a date.
Right. This kid seems sick, not evil.
I agree.
Okay.
I think I agree.
Right.
Except, well, I don't know. Yeah, I think I agree. I think ultimately he is a kid who should have had some counseling.
Oh,
and
yeah.
probably mom should have too.
Right.
And then maybe we would have been able to kind of control the whole situation.
Right.
The beating his brother with the socks on his hands.
Oh, yeah. That's,
like,
I forgot about that part.
Extreme.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right. That's a little,
Yeah. All right. So anyway, he goes home from church and he borrows a shovel from the next door neighbor and he drops it off at his house.
Wait. That part of the story is a little weird.
It's a little weird.
That they live in Nebraska and they don't own a shovel.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why they don't have a shovel.
I feel like everybody, like, I own a shovel.
Yeah. I own several
Jordan owns
shovels.
We all own shovels.
No, Jordan
like,
doesn't
who
own.
needs to borrow a shovel?
She doesn't have a shovel.
Can I borrow one? How do you need to bury a body? Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. That just seems weird that there would be a family that lives in Nebraska that
they lived in
own
like
a shovel.
Suburbia, so
right. You're issued a shovel, basically.
I was going to say
right?
maybe they just didn't need a real like they had some gardening trowels, but they didn't need a shovel. You're never gonna dig a grave with one of those little 4-inch trowels.
Gotcha.
So he borrows a shovel from the neighbor, drops it off at home, and then he goes over to Chris's house and spends the whole day with her family. Like nothing has happened.
Sure.
So that's the other part about this that makes me kind of go, maybe he has a little bit of evil. Like
maybe
for a while he manages to just forget, essentially. Like he just goes about his life like nothing is wrong, which is a little creepy.
That is a little creepy.
So that evening when it gets dark, he goes out and he takes the shovel that he's borrowed and he digs a big hole and his hands are all blistered and he's so worn out that like he collapses and has to rest. And then he goes back in the house down to the basement, takes the belt off of his dead father's body, ties it around his feet and hauls him back up the stairs. And then he drags him through the yard and drops him in the hole.
Oh, that's weird.
He takes the belt off his feet, goes back down, puts it on his mom's feet, drags her out to the hole and drops her on top. And then he buries them.
Right.
And then he does like kneel and have a little service. Like he prays over them and like cries. Like it's almost a funeral, right?
Right.
But still.
Yeah. But still.
You
murdered him.
Yeah. And then you buried them. Like you kept them and then you moved them.
Right.
Anyway, so there's one more problem that he has to solve, which is that the next day is Monday and his dad always goes to work. And if he just doesn't show up and nothing has been said to anyone, that's going to be suspicious. Because even if they left last minute, like there'd be some plan in place.
So the little brother at this point isn't like, hey, where's mom and dad?
Well, I think he probably gave him the same story. And the little brother was like, he seems very, very clueless throughout this whole thing. It gets even worse. Like, at some point, he should have wondered.
Should have put together two and two. Like, well, yeah. I guess if you're getting beaten up periodically with a sock full of... Fist, then...
If you're getting fisted with a sock, then that's totally different.
That's totally different. Totally different podcast. Right.
Yeah, well, he might have just been relieved to be like, oh, well, I have to go stay over here. Yeah, that sounds great. And he maybe even thought that, like, his parents arranged it all. Like, oh, well, they called Rose and I'm going over here and blah, blah, blah. Like, he didn't know that. So I don't know. I don't have any idea.
To say, right?
So he goes so Monday is also school day, but he drives early to his dad's office and opens it up for business. When the assistant comes in, he's like, look, my dad had to go out of town unexpectedly because of this family emergency, and he asked me to come and open up, but of course I have to go to school. Can you just cover for a few days for him? He'll be back. He'll explain everything, whatever. Right. And the assistant is like, okay, whatever. Like, he probably even had worked with Les. Like, it just, nobody suspects this kid. Right. He's a good kid. And actually, there will be a picture of him probably on our website when this comes out. He doesn't look like a bad guy at all. He's a little kid. Like, he looks totally innocent. Anyway. So he goes off to school. By the end of the week, Les had sort of decided that Rose might be getting a little bit suspicious because the parents had been gone so long without contacting her. And so he makes up some excuse and just goes and gets Jim and brings him back home. And Jim moves back into the house, still not questioning where the parents are. So that weekend, on Sunday, which was a week and a day after the murder, Les comes home and just about has a heart attack because his grandparents, the senile grandfather who has wandered off and his parents have gone to look for him, are at the house. Because they have been concerned that nobody has heard from his parents and they haven't been able to get in touch with his parents. And so they're worried. So they've come to check in on the boys. And I don't know what Les tells them, but it's something that kind of holds them off for a while. Right. They're very suspicious. There's some talk in the family about, well, do we call the police? Like, maybe something has happened and Les is lying. And the grandma's like, no, we can't jump to conclusions. Like, there's definitely something weird going on here, but we don't want to get Les in trouble if he didn't do anything wrong.
Right. This is Lincoln, Nebraska. There has to be a perfectly rational explanation.
Lincoln. It is Nebraska, but I don't think it's Lincoln. We've just been talking about Lincoln. We made that up.
Wait, there's more places in Nebraska than Lincoln?
Well, not with people, but...
Okay.
Cows and corn and shit. Excuse me. Thanks. Anyway. So, Rose calls... Oh, no, let's see. Les's grandmother calls Rose because Rose is the close family friend who lives, like, in the neighborhood, essentially. And she's like, hey, have you heard anything from Opal? Like, we're just trying to figure out what's going on. And it's immediately... So Rose is like, well, yeah, she got on a train to go find your husband. Who's missing. Ooh. And the grandma doesn't say, like, what are you talking about? But it's really clear that she has no idea what Rose is talking about because it's just a lie, right?
Right.
And Rose notices that she just doesn't have any idea. So everyone is really suspicious, but grandma's still like, no, we really can't tell anyone yet. Rose, on the other hand, does some poking around, and she somehow finds out that when Les said his parents jumped on a train to go look for the grandfather, there was no train. Like, there were no trains leaving anywhere around that time.
Well, there you go.
Right?
Right.
So Rose calls the police.
Naturally.
And she says, I don't know what to make of this, but here is what happened. I think my neighbors are missing. I think that the older son knows something about it because he's been telling stories that don't add up. Like,
right.
I just need to look into this. I'm a little bit worried. It's been a week.
Right.
I don't know what's going on. Well, around that time, the uncle or great uncle manages to I don't know if he talked the grandma into letting him call the police or if he just did it behind her back. Right. But he calls and he's like, my brother and sister-in-law or sister and brother-in-law are missing. I don't know what happened to them. I know that my nephew is acting a little weird, but, they're gone.
Right.
So the police show up. So it actually is the Saturday, so 2 full weeks since the murders. And they show up and they bring Les in and they start questioning him. And pretty much right away, he's like, yeah, they're dead. I killed them. Like, I've done this horrible, terrible thing.
Right.
And I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So they say, well, will you show us where they are? And he
Right.
says, if I have to, I'll show you where they are. And so they... So I've seen some pictures. Jordan said no one saw the grave in the backyard. I've seen some pictures, and it's very like wooded and like bushy, and there's a fence. Like I don't think that you could see it from anyone else's yard.
Right.
It's pretty well camouflaged. So, actually, this was kind of interesting too. So before the cops picked him up, he actually was at a football game with his girlfriend, just hanging out, having a normal life. Like, while everybody was calling the police and being like, hey, something's going on, he was just out acting normal still, which creeps me out.
That is a little unusual.
Yeah. So anyway, then he confesses, and he's tearful and sorry and remorseful and upset and everything else. So they cuff him, they take him back to his house, and since it's the 50s and we don't know anything about like forensics or apparently crime scene tape, it's just, the whole neighborhood shows up and piles into the backyard to see what's going on.
Sure.
And
well,
they're even there with
fair,
cameras.
to be fair, the neighborhood that we live in,
Yeah.
the whole neighborhood would be showing up, would be piling into the backyard to see what's going on.
Well, but at least they'd probably be held back to some extent by some tape, right?
Oh, that's true. Okay, gotcha.
These guys were like
Right.
standing next to it. They were like,
you.
the police officer's here and we're touching shoulders, and they were right on top of each other.
I got you.
And they brought cameras and, just all kinds of really inappropriate things.
Right.
So, Les points to a pile of dirt, and one of the police officers starts to dig it up. I guess they owned a shovel.
Right.
And
Right.
the first thing that they see is Opal's hand.
Oh.
And as
well,
soon...
if you're going to dig up a body, it's going to be traumatic.
Yes.
The hand is probably one of the first things you'd want to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, unless...
I take back my...
Unless the hand is like reaching desperately for the surface because the person
true.
wasn't dead when they got... No, then that's not
awfully dramatic. Okay.
That's super dramatic.
That's true.
I think it was in an episode of
If
Criminal
I'm
Minds I
ever
just
murdered and my
watched.
body's buried and they're digging me up, I hope they find my hand first.
But not because you were trying to dig yourself out.
Oh, yes. Because then that would imply... Right. But
Yeah.
I mean, just like for the dramatic effect. Like I
Or
want
your
maximum
toe, your
impact.
shoe. Your shoe would be okay.
Yeah, but not as dramatic as my hand.
Well, no, that's true.
Like I'm pretty dramatic.
All right, so they dig up her hand, and immediately one of the neighbors is like, "Oh, Les, how could you do it?" And he starts to just quietly cry. And so they cart him off to jail, and they try him. They charge him with 2 counts of first-degree murder based on his confession, and it could be a death penalty case because he's 17. Like, he's definitely old enough to be charged as an adult.
Right.
He shot his parents, and one of the big things that like the prosecutor's case hinges on, whether or not this is like first degree premeditated murder, is whether or not he loaded the gun. Because if he loaded the gun, which the prosecutor maintains he did, then he intended to shoot them.
Whereas if he pulled the trigger and not knowing the gun was loaded, then he could potentially say he wasn't
That first
planning
shot
on
was an
murdering them.
accident.
Right.
Well, or even if he didn't load the gun and he didn't know whether it was loaded or not, and by the time he pulled the trigger, he was intending to kill them, he still hadn't premeditated it. Like, it was a heat of the moment kind of impassioned thing, and that would be less.
Right.
Less for less.
Wow.
Anyway. It doesn't matter because he pleads guilty, and they do a deal, and he gets sentenced to life in prison. However, the prosecutor, like, as he's being led away, says, don't worry about it. It's not going to be forever. Like, you're 17. You're a good kid. You have no record. Most people spend about 10 years in prison, and then they get pardoned, and they get to go out on parole for the rest of their life. Like, just wait it out. Keep your head down. You'll still have a life.
Right.
Like, so that, and that's the prosecutor. That's not even his, like, defense team. That's,
Aww.
they were like, it's just not that big of a like,
So
you
even
screwed
the
up, but it's gonna be
prosecutor
okay.
had sympathy for this kid.
Yes, I think
Okay.
he was extremely sympathetic. He was
Okay.
very like baby faced and
Right.
And other than Jim and now his dead parents, like nobody knew there was
Right.
ever
Other than the people who he had beaten or killed.
right.
Sure.
Nobody knew that he was anything but perfect.
Right.
So Les goes to prison, and that should be the end of the story. But it's so totally not.
What?
No.
Wait.
So for 5 years, he's a model prisoner.
Right.
He writes letters to the warden. He really impresses everybody. Since he was the youngest person to ever be put in this prison, they all, like all of the guards and the warden and everybody wanted to look out for him.
Oh.
And so he sort of had like this special protective whatever.
Right.
He was a super hard worker. He was really smart. He very quickly finished his high school diploma, and then he tutored other inmates who were trying to get their diplomas.
Right.
He played in the prison band. Apparently that was a thing in the 50s.
Okay. Of
Or
course.
60s.
Right.
He had several jobs. At one point, he was an assistant to the deputy warden and would like type up notes on a typewriter he'd been given. And like he just sort of had a place of privilege everywhere.
Right.
So, and he was on his best behavior. Like nothing, he never, just like when he was at school, never showed his dark side.
Right.
So after about 5 years, things began to change. Like that's when he started to feel like, I've had enough of this. I want to be done now.
Right.
Which, best case scenario, he had another 5 years to go before he could even hope to be paroled.
Right.
So he starts to get like kind of grouchy, and he doesn't work as hard. One of his bosses at one of the jobs is like, we don't want him here anymore. He just tries not to do any work, and he complains all the time, and his attitude is really poor. Like, just take him away, whatever.
Right.
And other inmates would say, oh yeah, he's no fun to be around and whatever.
Right.
In prison, I don't like him.
Right.
He did only get one formal write-up while he was in prison, and it was
Right.
because when he was working in the kitchen one day, he made himself bacon and eggs to eat, unauthorized.
That's the way to go.
What an asshole.
Right? How dare you?
Right.
I think actually it's probably a pretty serious thing. Like, I think you get in a lot of trouble for that. As silly as that sounds.
Right.
But he manages to hold it together enough to be put in trustee housing. Not trustee housing with like double E's, but
Right.
trustee housing, which was essentially like a less secure section of the prison.
Okay.
So it would be a high security prison, not by our standards, but at the standards
Right.
of the time. High security prison.
Right.
And this would be like medium low security.
Okay.
And so basically it was outside of like the prison walls, but still inside the fences and the barbed wire.
Okay.
And it was like a dorm where they could live. And they
Okay.
usually would put people there if they were about to get out,
Right.
or if they were, they're just really well behaved. It was almost always for like preparing them to go back into life.
Oh, that's nice.
So, right. So you would think like that's super positive for him.
Sure.
Like he should just be good a little bit longer. He can go home.
Right.
Also, what I thought was really interesting is by this point, his girlfriend's parents have like all but adopted him.
Oh.
Chris's parents, after he killed his parents, like they were the ones that visited him and stuck up for him in court and sent him things and all of that.
So, given this kid's experience, at this point, he has as much going for him as one could possibly have in his situation.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's nothing better. You couldn't expect anything better.
Sure.
However,
Best case scenario.
he really wants to escape. That's his goal. So
That's dumb.
he's in trustee housing, and he gets introduced by a fellow inmate to another inmate named Jim Harding.
Right.
So here's what they have in common. They're men. They're in trustee housing.
Right.
And they both killed people. That's pretty much it. Because, even Harding said, oh, well, Les is a Boy Scout. Like, he's a goody two-shoes. They didn't like each other at all. But the other thing they had in common was they both wanted to escape. And they
Right.
knew that neither of them could do it on their own. So they put their heads together and they came up with a plan. And their plan involved 3 people. Both of them, and then another inmate who was about to be paroled, whose name we're not given. So the inmate gets paroled in May, and about 2 months later, he places a personal ad in the paper where Harding and Les knew to look for it.
Right.
That says, NOF arrives July 14. That's all it says. But that's the code.
NOF.
So later they interview Harding, and he's like, I don't know what that stands for. Like, maybe it was night of flight or something. I don't know. We just knew that was the code. So this was like early July, like maybe July 4th-ish. And July 5th, the parolee, whoever he is, tosses a package over the fence to the prison. So now it's like inside the grounds.
Right.
Well, Harding had started a habit of taking an early morning walk around the prison yard, probably in preparation for this.
Right.
And so nobody thought it was weird that he went and took a walk that morning.
Right.
And he just scooped up the package when no one was looking and took it back inside. So the package contained 2 masks, one of which was Groucho Marx for whatever
Of
reason.
course.
And some hacksaw blades.
Okay.
Okay. So for the next 2 days, Les and Harding skipped dinner and went to the music room because, of course, there's a music room.
Right.
And they hid in there and they used the hacksaw blades to saw through the bars on the window.
Right.
I feel like this is like an Old West prison.
That's beautiful.
With
It's like when I was a small child, I understood that when you were in jail, the thing that needed to happen was someone needed to bring you a cake shaped like a saw.
Yes.
And there was a saw baked inside the cake.
Yes, and then you saw through like a cartoon.
Of course.
Yes. Well, they actually did this. This is
Right.
real life. So after 2 days, they had managed to cut enough of the bars away that they could fit through it.
Right.
And so they used chewing gum to stick the bars back in place so that nobody would know that they had been removed.
Okay.
And then they just waited.
Right.
So the night of the 14th, they waited in their rooms until about 10 p.m.
Right.
Okay? So the rule was lights out at 11, and then very shortly after 11, guards would walk around and make sure everybody had lights out and they were all in bed.
Right.
So just after 10, so like when most people had started going to bed and there wasn't going to be anybody like walking past their room,
Sure.
they used their blankets and their clothes and the masks to make bodies in their beds.
This is like classic.
It's like a movie.
Right.
It's so silly.
Right.
So apparently Harding had to like cut some of the mustache off of his Groucho Marx mask so that it would like look like him. And
Right.
so anyway, they leave all of that there, and apparently, and then they leave. They go to the music room and they slip out of the window.
Right.
And there is a moment when they have to run across the prison yard, and it's only like, I think like 30 or 40 yards or something like that. It's not terribly long, but there's a guard tower with a perfect view of the yard,
Right.
which is like moderately well lit. So there's a real chance that like they're going to get caught. But this was the one part of their plan. They just had to trust to luck.
Okay.
And they're super lucky.
Right.
So they make it to the fence and no one sees them at all.
Right.
So they throw a jacket over the barbed wire because, like right now they have
Yeah.
major like ribbon wire circles and layers of it.
Right.
There were 3 strings of barbed wire on the top
Well,
of this
and
fence.
I know that. I know nothing about escaping from a major maximum security prison.
But you need a jacket.
But I know you need a jacket to throw over the barbed
Right.
wire at the top of it. Right.
Right. So they jump over, or they climb up, they jump over. Apparently Les is not particularly athletic in this area, and he gets hung up for a second or whatever. But anyway, they get away.
Oh, stupid Les.
Stupid Les. So they run into the woods,
Right.
and they come out at a road, and the parolee friend is waiting there with a car.
Right.
So they get
Well,
in the
that's-
car.
Right.
Right. It's like, yeah, great, right?
This is perfect.
They drive to Omaha, which is where Les grew up. So actually, you're
You know-
right, it was Omaha.
Well, where else are you going to
were
drive in
saying
Nebraska?
Lincoln.
Yeah, I was saying Lincoln.
No, it's Omaha.
Of course they drove to Omaha.
Right. So on the way they put in, on the way they put on some civilian clothes.
Okay.
And then they get dropped off at a bowling alley that Les used to hang out at it when he was younger.
Right.
And that's where, like, they had stopped planning. Like, I don't know if they never expected to get that far. Or they were just like, whatever, once we're out, we can do whatever.
Sure.
Because they had no plan after that.
Right. What are you going to do? Right.
So Les is like, well, I have a friend, and we were really good friends. I bet if I call him, he'd help. So he calls this man named Jim Child. By the way, everybody in this is named Jim. There are like 4 or 5 Jims in
It's
this
the
story.
50s. Everyone's either named Jim or Les.
Yeah, or Bill.
Or Bill, maybe.
Right.
Right.
So Jim Child is he's actually home on break from seminary because he's becoming a minister.
Right.
But he agrees to help them escape.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So he picks them up and he drives them to the train station. And when they get there, they realize there's no train until like the next morning, and they don't want to wait at the train station so close to the prison. So they're like, well, this isn't going to work. So then he drives them to the bus station.
Right.
He buys them tickets on a bus that leaves at 3:30 going to Chicago, 3:30 in the morning.
Right.
He gives them sandwiches that he had made at home, clothes that he had brought from home, and some the tickets, and then some cash. He had like $40 on him. He gave them that.
Right.
And then he never told anyone what he'd done. The cops come and question him later, and he's like, I don't know. I mean, I know who you're talking about, but I don't know anything about the escape. Like, just lied. And
Eryn,
they never suspected him.
Eryn, if I ever committed a terrible crime and were sent to jail, 5 years in, if I escaped...
Would I come get you?
Yeah. Would you come get me and make me sandwiches and bring me clothes?
It's really going to depend on your crime.
If I murdered people who were pretty horrible people.
Maybe.
Aw.
Maybe.
Thanks.
Even though I stand by my comment earlier of I can't think of anyone who deserves to be murdered at the moment.
Sure. Well, fair enough.
But if you were in a situation where you, and I know you, like felt like you had to murder someone.
Right.
Then,
right.
Yeah.
Or if I didn't really mean to, but it just sort of happened. Like I had the gun and it happened to be loaded. And they happened to piss me off. And I happened to pull the trigger. And they happened to die.
And then I happened to shoot 12 more times.
Right. And they were horrible human beings.
Right.
So would you bring me sandwiches?
I would definitely bring you a sandwich.
Aw, thanks,
maybe
Eryn.
even with a hacksaw blade inside.
Oh, I would bring you sandwiches too. And I would bring you a change of clothes.
Aw, thanks. All right, so they get on the bus and they leave. It was really stressful waiting for the bus to like pull out because they just knew they were going to be caught at any moment. Because as far as they knew, somebody had seen their bodies in the bed and been like, those aren't bodies.
Oh,
and like,
yeah.
they'd already been caught and they already knew to look at bus stations and anything else.
They're pushing their luck.
They really, really are. But the bus finally pulls out. Nobody comes to get them before they pull out and they start driving. So like 4 hours later, it's 7 a.m. and it's count time back at the prison. So all of the inmates just get counted at this point. Like, that's not how they do count in prisons now.
Right.
Now they come up to you, you say your name, you say your number, they mark you off on a list. At this point, apparently they went around and went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, shit, there's only 9 people here. There's supposed to be 11.
Right. As long as we got 11 people, we don't even care.
We don't care who they are.
Sure.
So they are 2 people short.
Right.
And they immediately, they find out who it is that's missing, right? Because they didn't do that ahead of time.
And I would just say, if you're a guard in charge of 11 people and there are 9, I'd hope you'd know the 2 that were missing. Right.
Well, and I don't know how many people there were actually there, but
okay, fair enough.
But either way, like,
sure.
It just seems like, oh, maybe those 2 people who were supposed to be in those 2 rooms that aren't.
Yeah, we should be able to figure out.
The other thing they think happened is, and they don't have any proof of this really, but they think that the other inmates must have taken their like fake bodies and disassembled them and hidden the pieces so that nobody knew that they hadn't been there at 11 o'clock the night before. Because the guards all assume when they call law enforcement, they're like, they must have left in the early morning because we know they were in bed last night.
We saw them in bed. We saw Groucho Marx in bed.
Right.
Right.
And so, at most they have this much of a head start, like blah, blah, blah. They didn't know they had any help on the outside. So as far as they knew, like, they were on foot. So they essentially like cordon off a 30-mile like radius around the prison.
Right.
And try to find them. Like, they make a net with law enforcement and they try to find them. Right. But of course, they're nowhere near the prison at this point. Like, they have already been to Omaha. Now they're on their way to... They're 3.5 hours into their trip to Chicago.
Right.
So they're gone. So they were just super, super lucky. So, in Chicago, they arrive and they split up pretty quickly. Les has like magic powers. So within a couple of days, he has found a job and a girlfriend and he's moved in with her.
Wow.
And
that's
Harding,
impressive.
right? Harding takes a little bit longer. He only sees Les one time after that, and it's just basically to say, you know what, there's no reason for us to keep tabs on each other anymore. Like, we were never going to be friends. We don't like each other. We both used each other to get what we want. Just go away. And that
Right.
was fine with both of them.
Sure.
That was their whole relationship.
Yeah.
But Harding does not get to stay free for very long. About 9 months later, he gets arrested. And the reason he's arrested is because he looks like, he resembles the guy who shot Martin Luther King Jr. And so they arrest him for that crime. And then once he's in custody, they're like, oh, wait, you're not James Earl Ray. Sorry. Oh, but you are an escaped murderer. Let's put you back in jail.
Oh, I've got mixed feelings about that.
You have mixed feelings about it?
Well, like, yeah, like we're arresting you because
I don't know. Once you're in custody, if you're a wanted
That's
person,
true.
who cares if the crime
That's
changes?
true.
Like, they can't be like, oh, we'll let you go and then we'll catch you again. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
They had to.
That's not fair. Yeah, you're innocent of the crime we arrested you for, but you also happen to be guilty of this other thing.
I mean, they could be like, oh, you're innocent of this crime. Let
Sure.
me let you go. And then the moment you step outside, be like, you're under arrest because you ran away from prison.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
there you go.
Either way, they arrest him. They put him back in prison.
Yep.
But really, he doesn't mind. Like, later he gets interviewed by people because, of course, now we know where he is. He's not
Right.
escaped anymore.
Right.
And he basically says, look, I spent another 8 years in prison, and then they pardoned and paroled me, even with my escape and everything else.
Right.
And now I just get to be free and on the outside and nobody's watching me. Those 9 months were hell because everybody was always looking over my I was always
Yeah.
looking over my shoulder. It was
Right.
terrifying.
Right.
He's like, actually, of the two of us, I feel like I'm luckier for getting caught
right.
than he is.
Right.
So, Les, on the other hand, is to this day still at large. They never found him. He is the last person to ever escape from this penitentiary.
Wow.
And there aren't any good records, but early on there are some like stories from people that he
Right.
may have actually been kind of caught a couple times. Like one time, supposedly he was arrested. He was picked up with a group of protesters who had gotten like a little disorderly, but they let him go before they realized who he was. Like, they
Right.
cleared him of that and let him go. And then another time, apparently there was something where he was picked up and they were like, hey, we think this might be your guy. But by the time they heard back from the prison, it wasn't like an internet search they could do really, really quick. Right? There was
Right.
no central database or anything. So by the time they heard back, they'd already let him go. So he may have actually been caught a couple times.
So when you go to Walmart
Uh-huh.
and there's that older gentleman that's there that is supposed to be a greeter, and
Yeah.
he doesn't necessarily say hi to you, he's just really making sure you're not leaving the store having stolen stuff.
He's not even doing that. He's just making you think he's doing that so that you won't steal it to begin with. Right.
That could be less.
Well, except they're pretty sure, like the people who know him and the people that were in prison with him
Right.
are fairly certain that if he is alive, and they think he is,
Right.
he's living in Brazil. Because when he was in prison, he had a book and he read this thing and he was showing it to other inmates.
Right.
That if you escape to Brazil and you get a Brazilian citizen pregnant, then Brazil will never ever like
Extradite
let you.
you.
Yes, they won't let you be extradited. Like they'll protect you from all of that, and so
Note
it was a
to
safe
self.
place to be. Right? I
So
don't know
if
if
I
that's
ever
still
commit a
thing.
crime,
Become straight, go to Brazil.
oh, because that would involve impregnation.
Yeah, you can't just
Damn it.
have sex with somebody in Brazil. You got to like actually knock her up.
Right.
It's gonna be hard to do that to a
Oh,
dude.
I don't know then.
Well, maybe aliens could be involved, and
Yeah.
there wouldn't have to be any actual sex.
True.
Anyway, so that's why they think that he's down in Brazil, and apparently a couple of people swore that they saw him and blah blah blah. But one interesting fact to kind of end on is if he were to show up today, and he'd be pretty old,
Right.
but even so old and escaped and free for so long, and even though he would have probably been paroled and released by this point anyway, he could still be taken back to prison to serve the rest of his life.
Oh. Well, if he's lived this long without having committed crimes,
Right.
What's a worse sentence? Like spending a small portion of your life in jail, or
Your whole life worrying that you're going to go back to jail.
right?
Yeah. So it was interesting because one of the articles I read was talking about apparently somebody that works with the prison system really sort of revived this case in a way.
Right.
Because he was looking for like escapees and other people that they could like write off and say, oh yeah, this person's definitely dead. We don't have to have them on our books anymore. It's
Right.
like someone we're looking for. And he came across the story and was just fascinated by it. And he said even though, you know, he works with the prison system, like he knows that you arrest that person and put him back in jail, and then the courts can decide whether or not he has to stay there. But
Right.
he has to go back to jail. That is the right thing to do.
Right.
He says he's struggled with it, and he's been like, you know, I don't know. I might talk to him and then pretend I never found him. Like there have been times when I've been
Wow.
like, I don't know. So, which really, I mean, at this point, like you were saying, he's obviously not been a danger to anyone else, or he would be arrested for something else. Like
Right.
that's what happens. You escape from prison or you run away from whatever and you evade law enforcement. You're just going to screw up again and go back. That's what you do.
Right.
But he has not.
So do you do you let him off the hook then after you found him, or do you put him? And it's sort of the lesser of two evils.
The less of two evils. Say that again, Mike. It's the what?
I don't think I can with a straight face. I feel terrible.
You were giggling before you
Right.
started saying it.
It's just because it dawned on me. So the moral of the story here, people, is unless you want your kid to murder you and run off to Brazil and impregnate some random person, don't name your kid Les.
Unless.
Right.
I thought the
Right.
moral of the story was let your kid go on the date.
Oh, that's a good one. Or if well, there are lots of morals to
If
the
you have a
story.
favorite, don't let anyone know.
Yeah. Remember to put socks on your hands when you beat up your little brother.
Yeah, there are a lot of lessons to be
Yeah,
learned.
I guess there are a
in
lot of
this
lessons to be
story.
learned. If, you can. It's okay to murder someone as long as you have a friend who's going to be on the outside that can help you escape.
Right.
I mean, I guess there are bad lessons.
Always put razor wire instead of barbed wire around your
Right.
prison.
Right.
Yeah, no, there's no good lesson to be learned from this.
I
But
guess
it's a
not.
fascinating story. Like, I kind of like to imagine that he's just like living a totally different life somewhere and has like, pretty much forgotten about
Right.
all of this. Like that's kind of a happy ending for somebody who maybe isn't evil but made a huge mistake.
Right. Right.
On the other hand, like if he is evil, at least he probably has lived his entire life with fear, so that's a good punishment. Like I feel like
That's true.
it's a win-win.
Yeah. This is. There's a lot to be gleaned from this.
It's an interesting case.
Yeah.
It was like a startling big headline, huge deal to begin with, and then 5 years later it was like this whole
Right.
new huge deal again. And now many years later, like we don't know anymore.
Right.
So Jim Child, the guy that helped him, that drove him to the bus stop and fed him sandwiches and all
Right.
that, he did, once he learned that like this case was being investigated again, and he hadn't heard from Les in decades, and so he
Right.
was very safe, and he was well past the statute of limitations.
Right.
He did go to a reporter and like tell his side of the story, so that's how they know about the train stop and the bus stop and all of that.
Right.
Like that's how it was verified.
Well, if you're a priest, like, aren't there certain, don't you have, like, if someone confesses a crime to you and you're a
Sure.
priest, you're not necessarily required to come
right.
forward.
But in this case, it was his crime.
Sanctuary, right? So I wonder if this guy Jim had any sort of.
So he said
Protection.
he felt a little bit conflicted about the whole thing, but he didn't feel any guilt.
Right.
And so he never told anyone. Like he
Well,
just,
there you go.
that was it. So that is my story. Lots of cool things to think about this week.
Yeah, I think.
Unless you have any other stories that you would like to share with us, then I think I'm going to do some shout outs and announcements and stuff.
Let's hear the shout outs.
I'm excited. Okay. So, first of all, we promised we would always give shout outs to people who leave us iTunes reviews.
Yeah.
Positive, negative, or in between.
Excellent.
So we did get 2 new reviews this week,
All right.
and so I'm giving my shout out. So so this might mean something to this person, but CIL9MXM.
Okay.
I feel like they slammed their head on the keyboard, but whatever.
Right.
And the other one is MLM, and then it's like 1, 1, 1, 2, 1. I don't know, lots of 1s and 2s.
Right.
Okay. So, thank you for the feedback. We actually really do appreciate it. We're sorry about the chattiness, and we will never have anything nice to say about the man who thinks he's President Trump. So, sorry, not sorry.
That's what they were upset about, that we were...
Yeah, that we talked bad about him. Well, because it's a crime podcast and not a political podcast, and I get that.
Sure.
But I also feel like there's a lot of crime going on in Washington, D.C. right now.
Right.
But anyway, thanks for giving us a try. Sorry we weren't your cup of tea. But I do have some other shout outs too. Cold Traces, which is a podcast, and
Right.
Fatal, which is also a true crime podcast.
Right.
We're doing sticker swaps with them.
Oh, cool.
And I'm super, super excited. So thanks, guys. And then, of course, also Mary Virginia Avery, who had posted about the story that I did today.
Yes.
So, and given me that idea to
Very
begin with.
cool
So,
stuff.
Thank you so much. Anything else you want to say?
I've had a blast. This has
Good.
been really cool.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
Yes. Gonna have a little bit of editing to do.
Yeah,
Just
we
a little
better.
bit. Oh my god. Yeah, we're gonna have to strangle Mike. Listen, if Mike never comes back on the show, we're
No.
really sorry, but I swear he's not buried in the backyard.
No.
Can I borrow your shovel?
Can I
Right,
borrow
yeah.
your shovel?
That's right.
Jordan doesn't have a shovel. Jordan, do you have anything you want to say?
No.
Nothing at all?
Of course I do, but it's already over 2 hours.
But don't you have something specific you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted you to say it like that. I was just milking it. So, guys, please don't end up on next week's episode. And thanks again to Mike for being me and half of me and letting me sit next to you.
Oh.
Have a great week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Crime Crazy. We hope that you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed making it. If you like our show, please tell a friend, or better yet, subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. We really appreciate your feedback and want to give you a shout out on the next episode if you leave us a review. If you leave us a review somewhere other than iTunes, just let us know. If you loved our show, consider donating to our Patreon. We have lots of great surprises that we want to share with anyone who supports us. And let's be real, it's really just an excuse to send you cool stuff. Thanks again, and remember, even though we really have no idea what we're talking about, we'll be back next week to talk about it all over again.